Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Build America podcast. We're a construction podcast that is capturing and sharing the very heartbeat of construction people, places, projects, and issues, as we'll talk about in just a few minutes in this episode. My name is Kerry Smith Buck, and I also own Construction News and Review magazine. My topic today is near and dear to a number of people's hearts, and that's how do you save a life in terms of mental health? How do you start the conversation? What do you say? What don't you say? And we have a gem of a person here today to walk us through this. He is Frank King. And for over 20 years, he wrote for The Tonight Show under Jay Leno. So he is a comedy writer. These days, he's performing corporate comedy, but he's got a dual mission. And that dual mission is also in his stead as a warrior in his own lifelong battle with depression and thoughts of suicide. And I know we'll be excited to learn how Frank is now talking to as many companies as will have him and fit into his calendar. He goes across the Pacific Northwest and the US, and he's hoping to just end the stigma surrounding mental health and just influence the general public, and particularly in our application, construction workers, how to start that conversation and save a life. Frank King, thank you so much for joining us today on Build America.
Kerry, you and I both know it's part of a plea bargain. Really not my choice.
I love it. I love it. And if you're interested in that, hang around after the recording. But Frank, I would love for you to share maybe just briefly your evolution into from comedy, where the intersection was, where you decided your kind of dual calling was to maybe speak in the language of comedy, but to really talk about something very serious, which is how to prevent people from dying by suicide. So tell us kind of, I know we could spend hours with that, with your story, but give us kind of a brief. How did you get from point A to point B?
Thumbnail sketch. People always ask, were you born funny? Yes, as a matter of fact, an amusing thing happened on the way down the birth canal. No, fourth grade, 9 years old, I told my first joke. Kids laughed. Teacher was hysterical. She had to excuse herself to go to the teacher's lounge. And I decided at that moment, at 9, I'm going to be a comedian. 12th grade talent show. Nobody had ever done stand-up before. I did stand-up. I won. Of course, I beat the accordion player and the folk dancers. Not a real big victory, but still. I told my mama I'm going to LA, be a comedian. She said, son, you're going to college first. I don't care what you do when you get done. You can be a goat herder for all I care. But you're going to be a goat herder with a college degree. So I went to UNC Chapel Hill, picked up a couple college degrees, and then I bolted for the West Coast. And April 1st, 1984, first open mic night, halfway through my set, I heard a voice inside my head that said, you're home. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this for a living for real. 18 months later, said to my girlfriend, now my wife of 38 years, I'm going to go on the road to be a comedian. Do you want to come along for the ride? Figuring she'd go, hell no. She goes, yeah. So we gave up our apartment. We gave up our jobs, jumped in my tiny little Dodge Colt, roller skate with a motor, and we were on the road for 2,629 nights in a row, 7 years and change, no home.
Wow.
We're Seinfeld and worked with Rosie and Ellen and Adam Sandler and Kevin James and Steve Harvey and Foxworthy. Opened up for Randy Travis and Nancy Wilson, the Beach Boys. It was a great 10-year run. It was a comedy boom. I came off the road, go to work at a radio station in my old hometown. I got to be a co-host on the morning show. And that lasted 18 months. Like most people in radio, there are two kinds of people who've been fired, people who are going to be fired. When I got done with radio, my boss said, just go back on the road. And the road was disappearing. The boom was over. So I jumped to corporate comedy because I had a clean act. After dinner, after lunch. And somebody said to me, what's the difference between a club comic and a corporate comic? About $5,000 a night plus travel. So I'm no math major, but that made sense. I rode that horse until the recession, 2008, 9, 10, and business dropped off 80% overnight. And we lost everything in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And that's when I learned what the barrel of my gun tasted like, literally. Now, spoiler alert, I did not pull the trigger. It's okay to laugh, I say to the audience. That was the point. They call it comic relief for a reason. A friend of mine came up during after keynote last year. Thought he'd be funny. He goes, hey, Frank, how come you didn't pull the trigger? I go, hey, man, could you try to sound slightly less disappointed? That's where the funny is in the topic. It's not jokes, but funny personal anecdotes. So fast forward to 2011, 12, conferences are happening again. But a meeting planner said to me, Frank, we love you. We just cannot pay you $5,000 anymore just to be funny. You've got to teach the audience something. Something I always wanted to do, make a living and a difference, but I had no idea how. What in the world do I have to teach anybody? So a friend of mine named Judy Carter wrote a book called The Message of You. Turn your life into a money-making speaking career. She gave me a copy and said, Frank, you read it, you'll figure it out. I went into it thinking I got nothing. And then about halfway through, I thought, I do have something to talk about. Given my 2 mental illnesses, near suicide, more nuts in my family than in a squirrel turd, I could keynote on suicide prevention if I got some training. So I got some training, got some certifications, including Vital Cog, which is an 8-hour simply suicide prevention and construction course. And I'm a train the trainer in that, train the trainer in something called QPR and mental health first aid. My second challenge was I've been a comic for 2.5 decades. Who's going to take me seriously? So my wife said, do a TEDx. I said, what's a TEDx? That week I got an application from a TEDx in Vancouver, British Columbia. I applied, auditioned, I got it, which is rare on the first try. And I did it. And that proved to everybody I could do something serious with humor, something deadly serious with humor. Then 2 more TEDx events called and said, do you have any more mental health topics? Oh, yeah. So that was number 2 and 3. I just did my 13th in April. 14th I've got scheduled for the fall of 26. So it's and all of them are on one aspect of mental health or another. So that's how I got into speaking. And then in 2018, I had a bunch of speeches, motivational, networking, cardiac comedy, because I've had a lot of cardiac work. I thought January 1st, 2018, I'm just going to be a suicide prevention speaker in the workplace because I'm a big believer in pick a lane. What's her name? A wealthy speaker coach, Jane Atkinson. She coined that phrase, I think. Pick a lane, because nowadays meeting planners want the expert or thought leader. Not somebody who can do half a dozen keynotes, but somebody who's an expert in suicide prevention in the workplace. And my second idea was, now let me narrow my marketing down to top 10 at-risk occupations for suicide in the U.S.
Sure.
So that's what I did. And construction, sadly, leads the league. 1,000 people died last year in construction accidents. 5,100 died by suicide. You're 5 times more likely to jump off the building than fall off. And that's just ridiculous. So it's when somebody calls me from a construction association, I don't have to convince them suicide prevention is a great idea.
Yeah.
They know that. They're just trying to figure out which suicide prevention speaker they're going to use. I was just in Phoenix at the Spark conference. It's a big national electrical contractors association. I did a breakout, and earlier this week I got a call from a company in Indiana. The gentleman who was with that company is with that company, saw me there. We had a chat afterwards, and somebody said, we need a suicide prevention speaker. And he said, I got the guy. We send them a contract today for like February 25 or 6. Again,
That's awesome.
yeah, it's a great need. When I coach speakers and I say, look, here's the deal. What one problem do you want to solve? Just one. And in my case, it's preventing suicides. Okay, who has that problem is willing to pay to help solve it? Construction and another 9 industries. And then what associations they belong to. So I just pitch associations because if I'm speaking in an association, the room is full of corporations with construction corporations with the same issue. So often you pick up another speaking engagement or 2 from the audience. That's the idea.
That's great. Thank you for that. It was a great recap. Let's talk about how to talk about it, because I know that there's a lot of fear, even in companies with a great company culture and a priority that they want to walk the walk, or they are walking the walk with regard to mental health well-being and suicide prevention. But I know it would be for me, there has to be that fear with a coworker that sees a fellow colleague on the job site and knows that just something's different about him than last week. And he's carrying some kind of a burden, it seems. There's that fear of, I'm sure, what do you say to that person and what do you not say? to make a difference. If you want to do the don'ts or the do's, maybe the don'ts first, what do you not say to someone that you think is battling a mental health crisis?
People often ask me, how do I know if somebody on the job site's depressed? Well, there are signs. It's not an exhaustive list, but the three that come to mind for me: one, they eat too much or they cannot eat. They sleep too much or they can't get to sleep. They have trouble getting out of bed in the morning. So they're often late for work or school. But then in the afternoon, they rally like an entirely different person. And here's one you can observe visually. Normally they're pretty well put together. But the last couple of weeks, hair's kind of dirty, clothes aren't quite so clean. It may be because they're having trouble getting out of bed in the morning, simply to run a little wash and take a shower. So the question comes up, what do you say to somebody you believe is depressed or tells you they're depressed? Well, here's what you don't say. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Turn that frown upside down. My personal favorite, have you tried fish oil? At which point I go from suicidal to homicidal. Now, what you do say is, I'm here for you and I mean it. I know you're not lazy, crazy, or self-absorbed. I know that depression's a mental illness, but with time and treatment, things will get better. I will take the time. I'll help you get the treatment. And here's the hard part. You then have to ask them in no uncertain terms, are you having thoughts of suicide? Just like that. Now tell the audience, if you can't do that, find someone who can. And if you can't find anybody, call me, I'll ask them. I always put my phone number, my cell number up on the screen in case somebody has an issue of some kind and they want to chat about it offline, not in front of everybody else. So let's say they don't admit they're having thoughts of suicide, but your gut tells you that may be the case. How would you know? Oftentimes they talk about death and dying a lot, or you catch them Googling death, dying, or how to die by suicide. They're gathering the means, either purchasing a firearm or stockpiling medication. They're getting their affairs in order, especially if they're giving away prized possessions, because they want to make sure the possessions go to the people they want them to go to when they're gone. And here's a counterintuitive one that's very dangerous. They've been depressed for a long time. Now they're happy for no apparent reason. And you're happy because, heck, they're happy. The problem is they may be happy because they've chosen time, place, and method, and they know the pain is coming to an end. A lot of people don't understand that most people who die by suicide don't want to die. I didn't want to die. I just wanted to end the pain. So let's say they tell you, yes, I'm having thoughts of suicide. What would you say? You would say, do you have a plan? If they have a plan, what is your plan? If it's detailed, time, place, and method, you need to get them to a mental health facility as soon as possible, or at the very least on the phone with 988, the Suicide Prevention Lifeline or text line. Now, this is something that a psychiatrist and I came up with because nobody ever addressed this in the classes I took. What if they have a plan, but it's not detailed? That's iffy. What would you say? I would say, okay, are you going to kill yourself? And if they said no, I would say, okay, tell me why not. Because
Oh, wow.
keeping them here. And then try to leverage that to keep them around for another day. So that's the protocol.
Wow. Wow. And you said, I know next to, I think the Bureau of Labor Statistics and OSHA, or both, or the CDC say next to mining, extraction, and something else, construction is way, way up there because let's look at the potential isolation. If someone's on a job and they're working 12 to 14-hour days, they're not by their support system. Maybe they're anxious, and we know there's an intersection between opioid abuse and substance use. And you put that together with alcohol and other things. And there's a lot of things in construction that people in the industry tell me aren't going to go away. Expedited project schedules, stress of the job, of all the safety hazards and other things. So a lot of those things, the hot climate in many cases, there's nothing we can do about that, but this we can do something about. Is that
Well,
true?
also male heavy, 8 out of 10 suicides in the U.S. on average every year are men, and construction's a male heavy industry, tough guys that might not reach out for help. Seasonal work, as you said, deadlines, lower educated workforce in some cases. As you said, injuries treated with opioids, which doesn't make things better. It's just a handful of risk factors that don't occur in any other industry, or don't not that many of them.
Sure. Do you feel that those conversations certainly need to happen at all levels, but that, say, between tradespeople or a trade who notices a regular subcontractor or who's working for a general and notices a project manager that seems a bit off in terms of struggling. Do you think that all the different quote unquote levels of supervision, that those conversations, certainly confidentially, but they need to be happening at different levels and not just a sort of a top down situation where somebody's supervisor is the one that has to have the talk?
Yes, absolutely. Part of my job when I speak is I'm not there to stop a suicide. I'm there to empower the audience to stop a suicide because anybody can stop a suicide. You can make a difference. You can save a life, and you can do it by doing something as simple as what we're doing right here, and that is starting the conversation if you know how. And we just taught everybody who's listening how to do that. Yeah, I think it's a gatekeeper concept. Be your brother's keeper. Be the gatekeeper. In the old days, when people wander through the gate of the village or something, there's somebody there watching everybody go by. And over time, you would notice a change in their behavior, a change in maybe the way they carry themselves, or things they say that seem innocuous. Yeah, they won't have to worry about me anymore. Okay. Does that mean you're going back to college, you're changing jobs, you're moving, or something more serious? So you're looking for a pattern. So the whole idea is that anybody can stop a suicide. When I speak, and I have often spoken on construction sites to the rank and file.
Okay.
I did one for Turner Construction in New York in a skyscraper they were building on the 25th floor. I'm the only guy there not wearing steel-toed shoes. If OSHA had come in, they would have gone, okay, who's the guy in the blazer and loafers? Well,
Yeah, they would have.
why is he here? I look like I've been dropped out of space onto that 25th floor. But it was rank and file. And so the idea is you look after your fellow. In a lot of industries, there's something called presenteeism. It costs U.S. companies more than absenteeism and lost productivity, lost time, hard costs, medical costs. And what it means is you're there physically, but you're not there mentally. And if you're working in a cube farm somewhere, an insurance company, nobody else is depending on you for their safety. But if you're on a construction crew, pretty much everybody needs to be looking out for everybody else when it comes to safety. And if you've got a coworker who's checked out mentally, but just happens to be wandering around there physically, that could be dangerous for everybody. I want to train everybody to spot the signs and then feel comfortable speaking out about it. I work for a company that makes fire hydrants. That's in Iowa, and I can't think of the name of the company, and I'd seen the 4 letters of the name, the last name, on the fire hydrants for years. I thought it meant something to do with water, but it's the company's Cloud, CLOW. I thought it was contain liquid something, but it's a family name.
Huh.
I spoke to them, did 2 shows, 2 different shifts, and they instituted a policy that if somebody asks you, "Are you okay?" as in maybe depressed, the first thing you have to say is, "Thank you for asking."
Oh,
No, I'm fine. We just have a newborn, and I haven't slept in 2 nights. That's why I'm walking around, stumbling around. So it takes the onus off asking. People feel comfortable if they see something, they can say something and not be harshed on.
right.
Which I told them that's brilliant, and I'm stealing it. But yeah, and after I left, one of the nurses they had 2 nurses on site, and I got a call, and they said, yeah, there were a couple of guys who came in and they were having issues, and they said, I'm here because Frank King said I had to come and tell someone. Nobody knew they were circling the drain.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And I think that's so important because not to criticize EAPs, employee assistance programs, or anything else, but I think the conversation is, like you said, the gateway. It's the bridge that gets somebody even comfortable enough to go in to that person in wherever that is in HR, or just to go in and seek help. We've got to bring help as close to them as we can, don't we? Because we've all been there, and that's a tough time to even try and be somewhat vulnerable enough to get help.
And part of my job is, Brene Brown says, being vulnerable as a speaker is a superpower, because when I go on stage and I talk about, as a man, talk about my 2 mental illnesses, near suicide, all the suicides in my family, I'm being vulnerable. And what it does is it gives people in the audience permission to give voice to their feelings and experiences. Sometimes in the general Q&A, but when I say at the end, we're going to do some general Q&A. And if you got a question you want to ask or a story you want to tell and you don't want to do it in front of everybody, hey, Frank, I'm crazy. Can you help me? I'll hang out another 30, 45 minutes and take them individually. And sometimes there's always a line, sometimes 2 people, sometimes 10. And
Mm.
most of the conversations start this way. I've never told anybody this. Yeah, I get that a lot. I was in Cincinnati. I did the Ohio Contractors Association annual banquet. And then one of the big Ohio construction companies hired me to do 3 keynotes on site, 3 of their sites.
Okay.
The last keynote, end of the day, I did my keynote, we did Q&A, and then when I got done, there's half a dozen guys lined up. Unusual because guys aren't usually forthcoming. First 5 were relatively easy questions to answer or stories to hear. The last guy in line was crying so hard he couldn't speak. He was a
Mm.
young, I would say 20-ish, 25-ish African American carpenter. And so he's crying. So I waited. And when he gathered himself, I said, "What's up?" He said, "I haven't slept in 2 nights. I work on the 5th floor of this building. I think about jumping off every day." "Why is that?" He said, "Because I've lost 3 people to violence in the last year, including my daughter who died in my arms.
Oh,
I'd like somebody to pull the pin on that emotional grenade and drop it in your lap." So
yeah.
the HR guy wasn't far away. So I waved him over and I said, "Look, you need to go get the EAP, Employee Assistance Program binder. Find the closest mental health facility to where we're standing right this minute. Take this nice young man by the hand and get him
Hmm.
there because he's circling the drain." So a couple of months later, I had occasion to talk to the HR guy about coming back, and I was terrified to ask. Finally, I got up my courage. "What do
No,
you do to
yeah.
a nice carpenter?" He goes, "Frank, he was evaluated, medicated, he's back on the job." Ah, yeah. That's the power
Uh,
of the conversation. I bet you his workmates had no idea he was struggling. I bet a lot of his family, if any, didn't have any idea how close he was to ending his life. But because
yeah.
I got on stage, because I was vulnerable, because I showed myself and all my warts and gave him permission to give voice, somebody who'd understand it wouldn't be judgmental, and he felt like sharing the story with me.
Oh, how wonderful that you can go to construction sites and talk to people while they're still living. I don't know another way to say that. I know I've talked to safety directors in covering these safety stories for our next edition. And that's the worst part, they say, is when they're invited to come out. They've been wanting to visit a company. And what sometimes makes the visit happen, very sadly, is because then there is a suicide and then they're called to the workplace. So, how wonderful that you can be in your Superman Spidey Man outfit and at that high rise, and that you get to have that audience of people, like you said, who are with us, and what a difference that can make. I'm looking at my clock. It's going so quickly. We've been visiting here with Frank King, and Frank is a corporate comedy professional, a TEDx speaker, and also certainly someone who's passionate about flipping his own lifelong battle with depression and with suicides in his family, and just turning that into a mission to teach people how to have these conversations and to debunk it, because so many of us have been in that spot. So thank you, Frank, for being with us today and learning us stuff. If you want to share your website or any way, if you want people to
Sure.
follow up with you, please do.
I'm in witness protection, so that's not going to be possible. But
Yeah, I can see the
no,
cats. Those of you who
yeah,
are not watching YouTube,
yeah. Well,
they look vicious.
witness protection, you got to leave the family behind. But I got my
Yeah.
cat. No, it's mentalhealthcomedian.com. Mentalhealthcomedian.com. That's my brand. That's my website. Or you just type in Frank King mental health comedian. You'll find me. It's been doing it long enough because I'm trying to set myself up as the expert or thought leader, and specifically in construction. I want to be well known in the construction field so that when people think about hiring a suicide prevention speaker, I get to type in a comedian mental health speaker. He'll come up.
Yeah, I mentioned not many come up, but this is a niche that you're perfecting and you're helping many people. So again, thank you, Frank King, for being with us today on Build America, and hope to have you back soon.
My pleasure.